What if the classic TV dads you grew up watching were hiding a secret the studios never allowed on prime time? Behind the perfect suburban smiles, some of America's most beloved father figures lived double lives that were carefully controlled or completely erased from the screen narrative. For decades, audiences believed they knew these family men, but the reality behind Hollywood's image machine tells a more complicated story. We uncover the hidden pressures, the silence, and the personal cost of maintaining an on-screen identity that didn't always match real life. Stay to see how these untold stories shaped classic TV history in ways most viewers never realized. Tell me in the comments, what do you think about how celebrity stories are presented to the public, and how do you see your favorite stars as public figures? Robert Reed, known to millions as Mike Brady in The Brady Bunch, came to define the image of the ideal American father for an entire generation. On screen, he represented stability, warmth, and moral clarity. Yet behind the cameras, Reed often pushed against the show's overly cheerful tone, clashing with creator Sherwood Schwartz over scripts he felt lacked depth and dismissed his classical theatrical training. He treated even simple sitcom scenes with a seriousness that sometimes created tension on set, insisting on nuance where the format often demanded simplicity. What was never openly discussed during the show's production was Reed's private life. He had briefly been married in the 1950s and had a daughter, but that marriage ended quietly. During his years on The Brady Bunch, Reed was living in a private relationship with a male partner, carefully maintaining separation between his public image and his personal reality. In an era when Hollywood offered little space for openness, he learned to navigate a double life: professional composure during the day, personal freedom in private spaces at night, always aware of the risk of exposure. Some colleagues later admitted they sensed the truth, though it was never spoken openly. Florence Henderson would later describe him as a tortured soul, suggesting that his emotional complexity often surfaced through his perfectionism and intensity on set. His dissatisfaction with the show's idealized scripts was not only artistic frustration, but also the strain of portraying perfection while concealing his own truth. Robert Reed passed away in 1992 from complications related to colon cancer, with HIV listed as a contributing factor. For many fans, it complicated the image of television's wholesome father figure. His story reflects not just a personal struggle, but an era in which silence was often the price of survival. Raymond Burr built an empire of authority on American television. As Perry Mason, and later as the wheelchair-bound detective Robert Ironside, he became the face of certainty, calm logic, and unwavering control. His deep voice and composed presence made audiences trust him instinctively. He was the man who always had the answer, the final word in a world of doubt. Yet behind that carefully constructed image, Burr carried a private narrative that was later revealed to be largely invented. He often spoke of a tragic past involving a wife and child who had died in a plane crash. Biographers would later confirm that this story never happened. It appears to have been created as a protective explanation for why he never publicly dated or shared details of his personal life. In reality, Burr shared a long-term partnership with actor Robert Benavides that lasted for more than 3 decades. Together, Burr and Benavides built a quiet life away from Hollywood's spotlight, traveling extensively and even developing a successful orchid business. However, their relationship was carefully shielded from public view, reinforced by studio publicity strategies and carefully managed appearances. Even photographs were sometimes staged to maintain the illusion of a conventional single star. On screen, Burr's role in Ironside, a strong detective navigating life with disability, added another layer of authority and control, reinforcing the image he projected publicly. In interviews, he was known for his precision and firmness, often redirecting personal questions before they could be explored. When Burr passed away in 1993, Benavides was frequently referred to only as a business associate in official obituaries, minimizing a relationship that had defined much of Burr's private life. His story reflects an era in which image was tightly controlled, and personal truth was often reshaped or erased to fit the expectations of Hollywood and its audience. Sebastian Cabot's commanding presence and rich, velvety British voice made him a natural fit for the role of Mr. French, the refined butler raising 3 orphaned children in the television series Family Affair. He brought an almost theatrical Shakespearean dignity to a sitcom premise that could have easily felt lightweight, elevating it into something warm, composed, and quietly elegant. For many viewers, he became the embodiment of sophistication and restraint on screen. Off-camera, Cabot was known for maintaining a highly private life. He never married and rarely offered personal details in interviews, a silence that only fueled curiosity within Hollywood circles and media columns. When questioned, he responded with polished deflection, often redirecting attention toward his craft, his appreciation for literature, or his well-known passion for gourmet cooking. His ability to remain composed under scrutiny became part of his public identity. Within industry whispers, it was quietly acknowledged that Cabot kept the company of male companions, though he never publicly addressed his personal relationships. At the same time, he occasionally used humor as a form of protection, even joking that food was his only true vice. These remarks, delivered with charm and timing, helped steer conversations away from deeper inquiry. Cabot also lived between 2 worlds, dividing his time between London and Los Angeles, maintaining residences on both sides of the Atlantic. This constant movement made it even more difficult for speculation to settle into certainty. When he passed away suddenly from a stroke in 1977, tributes largely focused on his distinguished career and memorable performances, while his private life remained carefully unspoken, leaving much of the man himself behind a curtain of discretion and dignity. Paul Lynde became one of television's most recognizable comedic voices, sharp, sarcastic, and unmistakably theatrical. On Hollywood squares, his quick wit and exaggerated delivery made him the standout star, turning every answer into a punchline that audiences eagerly anticipated. Yet when producers tried to reshape him into a conventional, straight suburban father on The Paul Lynde Show, the contrast was impossible to ignore. The humor that once felt electric now seemed constrained, as if the format itself was working against who he really was. Viewers could sense the tension between character and performer, even if nothing was ever openly acknowledged. Off-camera, Lynde's life was far more complex. Among friends in Hollywood circles, he was known for his flamboyant personality, biting humor, and gatherings filled with industry insiders and young male companions. But behind the laughter was a deep sense of isolation, intensified by an entertainment industry that relied on his persona while refusing to acknowledge his truth. His queerness became an unspoken layer of his comedy, hinted at, laughed with, but never directly addressed. Colleagues often described him as brilliant yet troubled, someone whose wit could dominate a room but also push people away before they got too close. His humor functioned as both shield and weapon. Over time, the gap between the public character and private reality became harder to sustain. He lived in a space where identity had to be performed in fragments, never fully spoken aloud. When he died in 1982, he left behind a legacy of unmatched comedic timing, but also the quiet reminder of how much of himself he was never allowed to fully reveal. His career remains a portrait of genius shaped and ultimately constrained by the silence of his era. Hugh Beaumont is best remembered as Ward Cleaver, the calm, dependable father figure at the center of Leave It to Beaver, a role that helped define the ideal American household for an entire generation. With his steady voice, composed demeanor, and almost effortless authority, he became a symbol of parental guidance, firm when necessary, but never unkind. Before his acting career fully took shape, Beaumont even served as a Methodist minister, a background that reinforced his public image as a man of principle and quiet moral clarity. On screen, he felt like someone viewers could trust without hesitation. Off-screen, he maintained a life that appeared equally structured. He married twice and raised 3 children, presenting a traditional family narrative that matched the expectations of the era. Yet, as with many figures from early television history, there are limited public records and unexplored gaps in his personal and professional timeline that leave parts of his life less clearly defined than his iconic role. After Leave It to Beaver ended, Beaumont gradually stepped away from Hollywood altogether. Rather than pursuing continued fame, he chose a quieter existence, becoming increasingly private and removed from the industry that had made him recognizable across America. Those who knew him described a man who valued solitude and discretion, rarely drawing attention to his personal affairs. He passed away in 1982, leaving behind a legacy firmly tied to the image of Ward Cleaver. While his television presence remains one of the most enduring symbols of mid-century family ideals, much of Hugh Beaumont's private world stayed carefully out of view, leaving history with a figure both familiar and, in many ways, still quietly unknown. Robert Young is remembered most clearly as Jim Anderson, the calm, principled father in Father Knows Best, a figure who helped define the ideal 1950s American household. On screen, he moved through family conflicts with patience and quiet authority, offering guidance without anger and discipline without harshness. The role became so closely tied to his public identity that many viewers assumed the character and the man were nearly the same. That image, however, masked a far more turbulent private reality. Behind the polished performances and awards that reinforced his perfect father reputation, Young struggled for years with severe depression and alcoholism. His condition led to multiple hospitalizations, and studio publicity teams worked carefully to contain any information that might disrupt his wholesome public image. In an era where television families symbolized stability, even a suggestion of personal instability was treated as a threat to the entire brand. The pressure of maintaining that contradiction was immense. The man who portrayed emotional steadiness on screen was, off-screen, navigating cycles of crisis that rarely reached the public eye. Biographical accounts also mention speculation about aspects of his private relationships, though nothing has ever been confirmed beyond rumor and interpretation. What remains clearly documented is his reliance on treatment and the careful management of his image to preserve his career. Later in life, Young continued to use his familiar, trustworthy persona in commercials, selling everyday comfort and domestic reassurance. Yet those close to him described moments of withdrawal, periods where he seemed to retreat behind an internal wall, separating the public father figure from the private individual beneath it. When filming, he could switch into the role of Jim Anderson instantly, as if the character offered structure strong enough to hold back everything else. Will Geer is best known to television audiences as Grandpa Walton in The Waltons, a role that embodied warmth, wisdom, and the steady moral presence of an idealized American elder. On screen, he felt like the heart of the family, gentle, grounded, and resilient in the face of hardship. For many viewers, especially those who grew up in mid-century America, he represented a comforting image of tradition and simplicity. Off-screen, however, Geer's life carried a very different weight. During the 1950s, he refused to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, a decision that led to his blacklisting and effectively pushed him out of mainstream Hollywood for years. The consequences were severe, cutting off opportunities and forcing him to rebuild his artistic life outside the studio system. Around this period, Geer was also connected to Harry Hay, a pioneering figure in early LGBTQ+ activism, a relationship that later became part of the quiet historical record surrounding his personal life. Geer married actress Herta Ware, and they had 3 children, though their marriage was not defined by conventional expectations and included periods of independence and complexity. When Hollywood shut its doors, he responded not with silence, but with creation, helping establish an outdoor theater in Los Angeles that became a refuge for artists who had been excluded or marginalized. Years later, The Waltons revived his career when he was already in his late 60s, bringing him renewed recognition and stability. Even with success restored, he remained deeply engaged in political and social issues, shaped by the scars of the blacklist era. Those who knew him described a man who never treated fame as comfort, but as responsibility, using his platform to speak, support others, and remember what had once been taken from him. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. See you in the next one.